Hey, what's up everybody? It's Kellen here from Start Your Systems, and welcome to another MX Simulator official track gameplay, round number 14 of the 2018 Monster Energy Supercross series from Minneapolis. And I know this video is coming out a little late. If you're watching it as it comes out, it's pretty much while practice is going on for the event. I apologize for that, but a couple things I had to get taken care of. And it kind of worked out anyway, because now I have something really huge to talk about in this video. But I'll get to that in a minute. First of all, this track, replica of the Minneapolis Supercross this weekend. Pretty fun track in game. It's kind of challenging, honestly. It's got a couple big rhythm sections that you have to hit just right. I don't have a road on for this video just because, well, honestly, I think this track plays pretty good without it. But I didn't really want to have to deal with crashing a bunch like I did on the Seattle video last week. I could tone a road down a lot, but I'd still probably crash a lot. I'm probably going to crash a lot anyway, so, you know, pretty straightforward track. Couple whoop sections back to back here, the only whoops on the track, and then back down the start straight. And like I said, the first rhythm section is pretty tricky. Couple different lines in it. Haven't quite seen what they're doing in real life yet today, but looks like it could be pretty cool. And then this corner here, they can go wide and get the power down and triple out of it. And then a Supercross triple, then a little split corner here. I don't know, pretty straightforward track. I felt like the MXS EMF track crew did a pretty good job building it this week. And I'm going to do a terrible job of riding it. But as usual with these videos, I always talk about what's going on in the real life racing. And so this is going to be probably a little delayed because most of you will hear this after Minneapolis has already happened. But this is technically a pre-Minneapolis discussion. And the biggest news, I'm going to talk most of the video about it. Brock Tickle has been, I don't want to say caught, but found to have some anti-doping or some doping medications, drugs, whatever you want to call it, in his system after a failed urine test at the San Diego Supercross. Now, I'm going to talk a couple things about this video, but essentially what he was caught with was, hold on, let me read it actually real quick. 5-methylhexane-2-amine, which is apparently, I haven't done a ton of research on this, but what I have found is that it is a fairly common substance, I guess is what we'll call it, that is found in pre-workout, which, I mean, anybody who goes to the gym nowadays often usually does some sort of pre-workout, like a little pre-workout shake or some powder in their drink or something like that. It's usually to, help with, forming muscles a little bit better, and it's sort of like a good recovery thing as well. Like it helps with muscle recovery, stuff like that. And generally it's just kind of there to help with your protein levels and stuff, get you set up for a good workout. And I would assume that quite a few pro riders do use pre-workout. Now, I did hear a rumor going around that supposedly he was actually using a nasal decongestant, and it had this substance. I don't know what to call it because I hate using the word drug, but it had this substance in the nasal spray. I don't know how true that rumor is. Thinking back to San Diego, I don't remember whether or not Brock was ill, so I can't swear to that, but let's just, for the sake of this argument, say that he was using a pre-workout, which, again, this seems kind of likely. These guys all have pretty ridiculous gym routines that they have to go through and stuff like that, so I could see it happening. And unfortunately, the penalty for these infractions, it has gone up recently. We saw Matt Moss test positively for a banned substance, which I don't believe was the first time that's actually happened for him, but they do have a minimum penalty listing within the WADA regulations rulebooks on, prohibited substance being found, and unfortunately, it's 4 years now. I don't know if that's exactly what they'll do, but if they stick by the book, that's what the penalty would be coming Brock Tickle's way. He is already indefinitely suspended. He, as far as I know, will not be racing tonight in Minneapolis, so there's that whole situation there. But, we saw James Stewart just last year, or not last year, but a couple years ago, get suspended, 2-year suspension. And then this is why I don't understand where they're getting the 4 years from, but Cade Clayson also tested positive last year and only got a 2-year suspension as well. So I don't quite understand if it's for sure going to be 4. My guess would be it's actually going to be 2, and that someone is just reading the rule incorrectly based on what happened to Matt Moss, which again, he had already tested positive once before to my knowledge. So I think that's why he got a 4-year suspension and instead of the 2-year suspension. So talking about FIM, WADA a little bit, going into this detail a little bit. The first thing I want to talk about is how ludicrous it is that it takes this long to get test results back anyway. I know lab processes take a long time. I get it. But if this was the Olympics, if this was the Tour de France, and one of those athletes tested positive, you would know about it at the very least within the week after the test happened, which is usually right after the event, right? So, to me, it makes it look like WADA doesn't care as much about our sport, and this was put on the back burner. They found the positive result, and now they're going to basically deem the same exact penalty necessary that they would deem if it was an Olympic athlete, even though they're really not holding them to the same standard. But the whole FIM WADA thing, just to throw my opinion in here, is that we do need drug testing in motocross and supercross. It's a world sport at this point. There's world motocross. We're technically racing a world supercross every year. And there's athletes that are putting in a lot of work, and manufacturers putting in a lot of money to have their bike, their brand, their athlete finish at the front. And so you cannot have cheating in instances like this. There's people getting suspended in far lesser sports for the same type of infractions. So they need to have drug testing in this sport, because I'm not going to name a big name, but if a big name who was winning a lot in this sport and getting a lot of money and helping their manufacturer get a lot of recognition was found to have been actually doping knowingly, it would be huge. It would be a monumental blow to the sport. It would definitely need to be taken care of, because you can't have that in this sport. I mean, this is one of, if not the most physically demanding sports in the world. And you can't tell me that we shouldn't have doping because nobody gains an advantage from it anyway. I mean, they totally would. If someone was blood doping to the point where they're helping oxygen levels within their body so that they could retain energy in a 30-minute moto, that's huge. If someone is lasting 30 minutes, no problem, they haven't broke a sweat and they're blowing the doors off of everybody, and they're doping to get there, that's something that needs to be solved. Now, I don't think anybody's done that yet at that level, but it could happen, and that's why I think doping needs to be tested for in motocross and supercross. And so I think it needs to be here. I don't think that WADA should be involved, though, however. And I know that the Nationals uses USADA, which is the United States Anti-Doping Agency, instead of the World Anti-Doping Agency, which is WADA. And WADA's here basically because the FIM has an agreement with them. The FIM is Federation de International Motorcycles, or whatever, International Motorcycle Federation, essentially, which is, part of MotoGP, World Supersport, World Motocross, anything that's a big two-wheel sanctioned event, the FIM is a part of. And so they have agreements through those events with WADA to test for anti-doping and stuff like that. So that's why WADA is here. Now, until we maybe get rid of the FIM being a part of American Supercross again, I don't think WADA will go away. But I also don't know if getting rid of the FIM is quite the right answer anyway, because it's what really puts American Supercross on the map as a world event. Yes, the media still will hype it the same way, but right now it is an American event. It is not a world event. I don't care if there's other riders from around the world competing in it. It's only happening in the United States of America, and they pretty much got away for a long time with calling it a world championship because they went to Canada and Canada only, which to me is kind of stupid. But it's an American championship. You don't see British motocross being called the British World Motocross Championship. It's British motocross. It's the same thing with UK Arena Cross or Canadian motocross or any of that. It's not, they call it AMA Supercross and FIM World Championship, but again, it's not a world championship. They're not going around the world. So I think that that's kind of stupid that the FIM is involved, but it does help gain global recognition for Supercross. If you win the Supercross title, you are a world champion. If they go away with the FIM, they can't claim that right now. So, you know, the past 10 years or so with the FIM being involved and us having world Supercross champions, we as Americans can say, hey, look, we have a world dirt bike championship as well, MXGP, which if the FIM went away, we wouldn't be able to say that. You know, we would just, oh yeah, that's our American series, which, you know, again, the media would still cover it as a big series, and we would still, as fans, know it's the best Supercross series in the world, but it's not the World Supercross series. So I think the FIM should stick around basically because it helps with naming, but I think we need to come up to an agreement. There really at this point should be a riders union about you know, drug testing, collective bargaining, all those types of things that would help riders get, you know, better agreements with teams, feel safer on the tracks, help out with doping penalties and stuff like that, because it's not 100% true, but in my opinion, James Stewart's suspension ruined his career. I think he was already kind of on his way out the door anyway. And yes, he came back and was competitive on some level, but he was really never the same. So I hate to say it, but I think it ruined his career, and I'm afraid to say that it might do the same to Brock Tickle at this point. Now, Cade Clayson, who is also, you know, serving the first of his 2-year suspension this year, I think he still will have years to go once his suspension is over. If Brock Tickle gets even a 2-year suspension, he's already kind of reaching the longer ends of the sport in his, you know, time being around. He has only raced the 450 class since 2012. 2012 is when his first 450 season was. So this is his, you know, 7th full season essentially. But, you know, we've already seen Dungey only went 8 full seasons. So if Brock has to sit out 2 more years, he's looking at coming back at the end of his, you know, it would be like in the middle of his 9th full season because the way this penalty is going to work out and all this stuff. But, you know, I mean, he would be kind of past his prime, unfortunately, at that point. You know, we've already seen how Chad is not really the same Chad that he was. It seemed like the last time Chad was really Chad was 2014, and that was his 11th season in the 450 class, which, you know, I don't think you can really classify Brock Tickle and Chad Reed in the same boat, but you get my point with this. So it sucks. Like, this is gonna be huge because I don't think Tickle did it on purpose, and that's the problem with these doping penalties, is that they have to treat them as if they were done purposely because they can't leave it open to judgment. It's the same thing with Stewart and not getting his TUE for Adderall. It's going to be the same thing for Clayson, which essentially what happened with Clayson was he did apply for a TUE and waited months for FIM approval, never ever heard back after applying for his TUE, so he took what he needed to take, his prescribed medication, and then of course tested positively for it. And because they didn't have an approved TUE on file, he got a 2-year suspension. But in his case, it's like, hey, I submitted it, you guys just never got back to me, what the hell? Which, you know, makes sense. But again, that's just how they have to treat it, because they don't know whether or not Brock Tickle for sure was not actually doping with this drug, which can help. This, you know, what the drug he tested positive for can positively affect his performance in a way that he could dope with it and do better. You know, that leaves the discussion to be opened about, well, if he was doing it purposely, was it really helping? Because look, he's had a rough year anyway, which it hasn't been that rough, but I think people expected better from Brock. But again, I think that it was just another kind of mistake. Same with Clayson, same with Stewart, and now same with Brock. And because the World Anti-Doping Agency has to treat it as if they were doing it on purpose, these huge penalties get handled down, because someone who is actually doping on purpose most of the time is smart enough to know how to get it out of their system. So even if minute traces of it are found in their system, it has to reach a certain threshold anyway. But even if some traces were found in their system, the anti-doping agency has to think, oh, maybe they were doing it full blown and we just caught them at the tail end of their system cycling it out. It happens all the time. Look at cycling, look at the Olympics, all these sports that WADA is deeply involved in, and how often those athletes are doping. If you want a really good insight into the world of doping and how it is a real problem that WADA can't really solve, you need to watch the documentary called Icarus, Icarus. It's on Netflix, I believe. In fact, I think it's a Netflix original documentary. It is mind-blowing how many drugs you can put into your system and not test positively via WADA. It is insane. And cyclists, tons of them get away with it every year. And so, we have guys that take a little bit of pre-workout and gets, huge suspensions, and cyclists are literally putting syringes in their butt 4 or 5 times a day and getting away with it no problem. So, there's definitely a problem with WADA. My solution would be, and I think you can't do it because of the FIM sanctioning, but you need to have an independent agency come in and take this over. You need to solicit a university study to come in and conduct the drug testing, because then you could make your own rules. They're not a sanctioning body. They can't determine what the rules are for this, positive drug test. So the AMA, who should have jurisdiction over all this anyway, because it is their series in both, indoors and out, essentially, they're the sanctioning body. They should have final say on what the penalty is, but because they have agreements with WADA, and WADA has their own rule book on what the penalties are going to be, that, that's just how it gets laid out. It sucks, but that's just the way it goes. And so I think you need an independent agency to come in, the sanctioning body, to determine appropriate penalties, because obviously there's a problem going on where careers are being ruined in a sport that longevity isn't very huge. In cycling, you can have a pretty decently long career. It will destroy your body after 20 years, but you can kind of go that long. There's guys that have been cycling at the top of the sport for a damn long time that are still there. And Olympics, it's kind of different because you only get maybe 1 or 2 Olympics where you're really the peak physical athlete. But in the respective sport that you're in, let's say it's swimming, Michael Phelps went to 4 Olympic Games, which means he lasted basically 16 years at the top of his sport. And so that, on some level, these guys have longevity more so than an AMA Supercross rider would, because their body just gets too physically destroyed and their career is over before they can really get any sort of long-term positive results. Like Chad Reed going as long as he has is an absolute anomaly, and he's only been racing in the AMA series for 15 years. That's shorter than a lot of cyclists, a lot of gymnasts, a lot of swimmers are able to go in their sport because of the physical demand of our sport. So I think that something needs to change there. Like I said, I was going to talk a lot in this video. I pretty much talked the whole video about the whole suspension, but it sucks that, it's going to basically destroy this guy's career, and it was probably, at least in my opinion, and I'm sure in many others, an honest mistake. I don't think that he was actively doping like we see cyclists do these days, and instead he's going to get the same, if not more severe punishment because he got caught for it. So sucks for that. In regards to Minneapolis tonight, whether or not Brock is actually there, it is going to be a Triple Crown event, so that's going to be exciting to watch. Those Triple Crown events are always pretty good. Unfortunately, what I read this morning is it's actually tape delayed, so it's going to be on 2 hours after it starts, which is kind of crappy, how these tape delayed things go. But maybe we'll do a little bit of live stream if I have time or something to kill the time, and have some fun there. I don't have picks for tonight because, hell, I don't know. It's Triple Crown. It's crazy. We're probably going to have 6 different winners in all 6 races. So I really don't know what to say other than talk a little bit about Brock Tickle and that whole situation. So thank you guys for watching another video here on the channel. You guys can go ahead and download this track in the description below. Love to hear your thoughts and opinions on the Tickle suspension and any other things you guys wish to talk about. I'm here to talk back. And yeah, thanks for watching again. And I'm Kellen, and I'll see you guys in the next one.